The captive of the void. Darkness. Cold metal. Silence. Commander Xylura opened her eyes. Her body ached. Her wrists burned from the energy cuffs locking her hands together. A dim red light flickered overhead, casting long shadows in the small, empty prison cell. The air smelled of rust and burnt circuits. She was still alive. But for how long? Xylura pulled at the cuffs, but the energy restraints only tightened, sending a sharp jolt through her nerves. She gritted her teeth. The Zithar Dominion didn't take traitors lightly, and that was exactly what they saw her as, a traitor. She had been one of them once, a decorated officer, a respected warrior, but she had made a choice. She had refused to follow orders. She had refused to destroy an unarmed human colony. And now that colony was gone anyway, burned to ash by the very fleet she once served. Through the tiny window in her cell, she could see what was left of the planet, a lifeless rock, still glowing with fire from the bombardment. She had tried to stop it. She had begged her commander to reconsider. She had even stood between the human civilians and the Zithar soldiers. But in the end, her mercy had cost her everything. A heavy door hissed open. Xylura didn't move as two Zithar guards entered, their armored boots clanking against the metal floor. One of them, a hulking brute with dark red scales and piercing black eyes, sneered at her. "Look at you now, Commander," he said, his voice filled with mockery. "Not so noble anymore, are you?" Xylura kept her face blank. Showing weakness would only amuse them. "The High Warlord has decided your fate," the second guard said, stepping forward. "You will not die quickly." Xylura knew what that meant. The Zithar didn't execute traitors immediately. They preferred slow suffering, a public display, a lesson to anyone else who dared to question the Dominion. The first guard leaned closer. "Tomorrow, you will beg for death." Xylura met his gaze. "You should have killed me already." The guard snarled and raised his fist. Before he could strike, the ship shook violently. Alarms blared. The lights flickered. Somewhere in the distance, an explosion rumbled through the corridors. The guard stumbled, exchanging confused glances. Xylura's heart pounded. What was happening? The intercom crackled to life. "Warning. Unauthorized breach detected. Security teams, report to Sector 4. Another explosion. Closer this time. The ship lurched again, and the red emergency lights bathed the cell in an eerie glow. The guards tensed, their hands flying to their weapons. "Stay here," one of them growled, before they both rushed out, sealing the door behind them. Xylura stared at the heavy metal door. She was still trapped. She closed her eyes, listening to the chaos outside. Gunfire. Screams. The hiss of plasma weapons. Whoever had boarded the ship was fighting hard. But who? Not the Zithar. They had no enemies powerful enough to launch a direct attack on one of their warships. Unless a sudden voice crackled through the intercom above her. "Hold on, Commander. We're getting you out." Xylura's eyes snapped open. That voice. Human. She barely had time to react before a deafening explosion shook the walls. The door to her cell trembled, cracks forming along the edges. A second explosion blasted the door clean off its hinges. Smoke filled the cell. Xylura coughed, squinting as figures emerged from the haze. Humans. Armed. Wearing black combat armor. Moving with precision. One of them stepped forward. His face was rugged, scared from years of battle. His sharp brown eyes locked onto hers. "Commander Xylura." She hesitated. "Who are you?" The man smirked. "The guy risking his neck to get you out." Xylura stared at him in disbelief. These were the same humans she had saved, the same people she had tried to protect. And now they were here for her. "Why?" she asked, still struggling to process what was happening. The man's expression hardened. "Because you didn't let us die when you had the chance, and we don't abandon our own." Before Xylura could respond, another explosion rocked the ship. "Move, now!" The soldier barked, slicing through her energy cuffs with a plasma knife. The restraints fell to the ground, and Solara's hands were finally free. She flexed her fingers, feeling blood rush back into them. She glanced at the human soldiers, then at the burning remains of the prison door. For the first time since her capture, hope flickered inside her. But it wasn't over yet. The Zithar weren't going to let her go so easily. And neither was she. Humanity's unlikely rescue. Smoke, fire, chaos. Solara sprinted through the ruined corridors of the Zithar warship, her heart pounding. Gunfire echoed all around her. The air was thick with the acrid stench of burning metal and plasma residue. Alarm sirens screamed through the ship, their wailing tones clashing with the rapid shouts of Zithar officers barking orders. Beside her, the human soldier, Dax Carter, moved with ruthless precision, his plasma rifle firing controlled bursts at the enemy. Every shot hit its mark. His team followed close behind, moving like shadows in the smoke, cutting down the Zithar guards before they could even react. Solara barely understood what was happening. Why were humans here? Why had they risked their lives to save her? They had called her one of their own. But she wasn't human. She wasn't even supposed to be alive. Minutes earlier, after Dax Carter had freed her from the energy cuffs, Solara had been hesitant to follow him. "You're here for me?" she had asked, still in disbelief. Dax had given her a curt nod. Wouldn't be here otherwise. She studied him carefully. Humans had always been seen as a lesser race in the galactic order, fragile, outnumbered, technologically behind. And yet, these were the same beings who had stormed a heavily guarded Zithar warship to rescue someone who wasn't even one of them. "Why?" she had demanded, her voice sharp. "Why risk your lives for me?" Dax's expression didn't change. "Because you risked yours for us. We don't forget things like that." There had been no time for more questions. Explosions had rocked the ship. The rescue had begun. Now, Solara ducked as a blast scorched the wall behind her, the heat searing against her back. "We're sitting ducks here," she shouted over the chaos. Dax didn't even flinch. "We get to the escape route. We live. We stand here. We die." Simple choice. Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one running through a warship full of people who wanted to see him skinned alive. Solara moved in sync with the human squad, dodging plasma fire, weaving through the wreckage of fallen Zithar soldiers. These humans fought differently than any species she had ever seen. Agile, reckless, but effective. They didn't fight with the cold precision of the Zithar, nor with the brute force of the warlike Gorgons. They fought like they had nothing to lose. The team reached a security checkpoint. The bulkhead doors ahead were shut tight, their reinforced plating glowing with energy locks. Dax motioned to his tech specialist, a wiry woman named Nia Reyes. "Get it open. Fast." Nia dropped to one knee, a hacking device already in her hands. She tapped a few commands on its interface. A sudden voice boomed through the ship's intercom. "This is High Warlord Threxis. All units, converge on Sector 4. Kill the humans. Capture the traitor." Solara's blood ran cold. Threxis, her former commander, the one who had ordered the destruction of the human colony, the one who had sent her to die in this cell. And now he was coming for her. Nia cursed under her breath. "The system's fighting back. I need more time." "We don't have time," one of the other soldiers shouted as Zithar enforcers stormed into the corridor behind them. Dax raised his rifle. "Buy her some then." The firefight erupted instantly. Solara pressed her back against the wall, adrenaline surging through her. The Zithar forces charged forward in tight formation, their heavy armor shielding them from most of the plasma fire. Their warriors were ruthless, brutal. They advanced with unwavering discipline, their blasters unloading a storm of deadly bolts toward the humans. Dax and his team fought back with rapid, coordinated attacks, ducking behind cover, using grenades to break the enemy's formation. But the Zithar just kept coming. For every soldier the humans cut down, 3 more took their place. Dax growled. This is getting bad. Zilera clenched her fists. She could run. Leave them to fight while she found her own way out. It would be easier, safer. But she owed them. She grabbed a fallen Zithar's weapon, a shock lance, and sprang forward, slashing through the nearest enemy's armor. The warrior staggered, snarling in pain. She didn't stop. She became a weapon herself, moving faster, hitting harder. Dax spared her a glance. A grin flickered across his face. Hell yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The battle intensified. The humans and Zilera fought side by side, covering each other's blind spots, pushing the Zithar back inch by inch. Then, doors open, Nia shouted. Dax didn't hesitate. Go, go, go. The team rushed through the bulkhead door just as Nia slammed the override, sealing it behind them. The corridor shook as the Zithar outside tried to blast through. Panting, Zilera looked around. They had entered a docking bay. And there, waiting for them, was a sleek, heavily armored human warship. Their escape. Dax tapped his communicator. We got her. Prep for launch. A voice crackled back. Acknowledged. Get on board before that whole damn ship blows. Zilera turned to Dax, still trying to make sense of everything. You risked your lives for this. Dax smirked, motioning for her to move. No time for talking. You coming or not? Zilera hesitated for only a second. Then she ran after him. Behind them, the Zithar warship shook with another explosion. This wasn't over. Not yet. Board the human warship. Zilera had spent her life aboard warships. She had commanded fleets, led planetary raids, and navigated through the vast void of space under Zithar rule. But as she stepped onto the human warship, something felt different. The air was thick with tension, but there was something else, something she had never felt before on a military vessel. Purpose. She had always believed humans were weaker than the Zithar, a race constantly on the brink of extinction. But now, as she was surrounded by them, hearing their voices, seeing their unity, she wasn't so sure. She wasn't their leader. She wasn't even their species, but they had risked everything for her. Why? The heavy steel doors sealed shut behind her, cutting off the sight of the burning Zithar warship in the distance. A new chapter had begun. The first encounter with the Admiral. The ship rumbled as it entered hyperspace, leaving the battlefield behind. Zilera was still breathing heavily, her hands bruised, her mind racing. Dax Carter led her through the dimly lit corridors. The human warship was old, battle-scared, but still fully operational. Engineers rushed past, shouting to one another. Soldiers checked their weapons. Every person had a purpose. They weren't fighting because they wanted war. They were fighting to survive. Dax glanced at her as they walked. You're quiet. Zilera clenched her fists. I'm still trying to understand why you did this. Yeah, you said that back there. He smirked. Didn't believe me the first time. I don't believe in self-sacrifice without a reason. Dax stopped in front of a thick metal door. Then maybe you should meet the person who gave the order. The doors slid open, revealing a command center unlike anything Zilera had seen before. It wasn't like the cold, sterile halls of a Zithar fleet command. There were no silent warriors standing at attention, no harsh voices barking orders. Instead, there was movement. Officers argued over battle strategies. Tactical maps flickered with rapid changes. The scent of burnt wiring mixed with the metallic tang of recycled air. And in the middle of it all stood Admiral Elias Hayes. He was older, his silver-streaked hair a sign of battle survived. His uniform was worn but meticulously kept. His eyes were sharp, filled with a quiet fire that demanded respect. The room went silent as he turned to face her. Commander Zilera. His voice was deep, steady. You're finally here. Zilera's instincts screamed at her to stand tall, to show no weakness. But she wasn't a Zithar officer anymore, was she? She met his gaze. You risked lives to save me. Hayes studied her for a long moment before answering. You saved one of our colonies. That makes you one of us. Silara stiffened. I am not one of you. No, Hayes agreed. But you chose humanity over your own kind. That's all that matters. Silence. Silara didn't know how to respond to that. The briefing. The war humanity is losing. The tension broke when a young officer rushed forward. Admiral, we have the damage reports. Hayes turned to Dax. Take her to the war room. Silara followed, still trying to process what had just happened. Inside the war room, holographic displays flickered to life. Star charts, fleet formations, destruction reports. Silara's eyes darted across the data. The Zithar weren't just fighting humanity. They were winning. Entire planets had been wiped out. Human fleets were scattered, barely holding the line. The Zithar were closing in on Earth. This is what we're up against, Dax said grimly. Your people aren't just fighting us. They're exterminating us. Silara felt a pit form in her stomach. She had known the Zithar were ruthless. But this was a war of annihilation. She turned to Dax. Then why waste resources to save me? He crossed his arms. Because we're not like them. Silara felt something in her chest tighten. The Zithar would never have done this. If the situations were reversed, they would have let a human prisoner rot. No, worse. They would have displayed their corpse as a warning to others. Yet here she was, standing on a human warship, saved by the very people her own kind wanted to wipe out. The attack. The Zithar have found them. Before she could say another word, alarms blared through the ship. Zithar warships inbound. Hayes' voice crackled through the intercom. All hands, battle stations. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Silara rushed to the nearest display. 3 Zithar warships had appeared on the scanners, closing in fast. Her stomach dropped. They tracked us. Dax swore. How the hell did they find us so fast? Silara's mind raced. The Zithar never let prisoners escape. If they were here, it meant one thing. Someone on board was a traitor. But there was no time to think. The first blasts rocked the ship, sending crew members staggering. Returning fire. A soldier called out. Silara saw the battle unfold on the main display. The human ship was fast but outgunned. If they stayed and fought, they would be destroyed. She turned to Hayes. You need to get out of here. Hayes narrowed his eyes. You think I don't know that? Silara shook her head. Not like this. They're trying to herd you into a trap. Dax looked at her sharply. How do you know? She knew because it was exactly what the Zithar would do. This was a classic hunting maneuver, cornering prey into a kill zone. We need to change course, she said urgently. If we follow their expected trajectory, we'll be dead in minutes. Hayes hesitated for only a second before nodding. Pilot, alter course. I want full thrusters. Make it look like we're running, but keep us unpredictable. The human warship suddenly veered off course, dodging between asteroids, forcing the Zithar ships to adjust. It worked. A moment later, the first Zithar ship overshot them, struggling to correct its path. That was all the humans needed. Fire everything, Hayes commanded. The warship unleashed a storm of firepower. The first Zithar ship exploded in a ball of flames. The others hesitated, just long enough for the humans to escape into hyperspace. For the first time, Silara felt something she never expected. She felt like she was part of their fight, and she wasn't sure she wanted to walk away. The betrayal and the choice. The stars outside the warship's viewing bay were cold and silent, but inside, a storm was brewing. Silara stood in the war room, staring at the tactical map flickering before her. She had been aboard the human warship for only a few hours, but it felt like everything had changed. She was no longer a prisoner, no longer a Zithar officer, but she wasn't human either. She was something in between. Behind her, Admiral Hayes, Dax Carter, and the senior officers discussed their next move. The Zithar warships had been shaken off, but they wouldn't stay lost forever. "We have a traitor on board." Silara's voice cut through the tense discussion like a blade. The humans fell silent, all eyes turning to her. Dax narrowed his gaze. "You sure?" Silara turned to face them. "The Zithar don't make mistakes like that. They don't lose targets unless they want to. They tracked us too fast. That means someone is feeding them information." The war room remained deadly silent. Then Hayes spoke, his voice cold. "If you're right, then we have a serious problem." He turned to his officers. "Lock down the ship. No one leaves their stations unless cleared by security." A soldier nodded and activated the ship-wide security lockdown. Silara studied the humans carefully. One of them was a traitor. And if they didn't find out who soon, the entire ship would be doomed. The betrayal revealed. The warship remained on high alert. Every soldier was checked, questioned, scanned, but no signs of sabotage were found. Still, Silara couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She needed to think like a Zithar. What would she do if she were a spy? She made her way through the dim corridors, observing the crew. Humans were different from the Zithar. They weren't cold, emotionless warriors bred for war. They cared for one another. They joked, they worried, they fought out of necessity, not out of duty. And that made them stronger than the Zithar understood. She reached the ship's engine room and froze. A lone engineer stood near the warp drive, his hands moving too quickly over the console. Silara's instincts screamed. She lunged forward just as the engineer pulled out a small data chip. The man spun around, his eyes widening. Damn it. He drew a small weapon. Zithar technology. Traitor. Silara moved instantly. She grabbed his wrist, twisting it violently. The weapon clattered to the ground as the man cried out. She forced him against the wall, her grip tight. "Who are you working for?" The traitor gritted his teeth. "Doesn't matter. You're all dead anyway." A sudden beeping sound echoed in the room. Silara's eyes darted to the control panel. A countdown. The Zithar had been waiting for confirmation. This traitor had just sent the signal. In less than 3 minutes, the Zithar fleet would find them. Dax's voice came through the comms. "What the hell is going on?" Silara growled, slamming the traitor to the floor. "We have a problem." The desperate escape. The alarms blared. The Zithar were coming. Silara and Dax raced through the corridors, the traitor bound and being dragged behind them. "Status," Hayes demanded as they reached the bridge. Dax threw the traitor onto the floor. "Found our rat." He sent a signal. "The Zithar are en route." Hayes didn't even glance at the traitor. His face was stone. "How long until they arrive?" A technician checked the radar. 2 minutes. Too fast. They wouldn't be able to outrun them this time. Silara looked at the ship's status. They were low on weapons, their shields were damaged, and there were at least 3 Zithar warships incoming. She exhaled slowly. There was only one way out. She turned to Hayes. "You won't survive a direct fight." "We don't plan to surrender either," Hayes shot back. Silara shook her head. "I know the Zithar tactics. Their ships have a blind spot near their rear engines. If we move fast enough, we can get behind them, disable their targeting systems, and escape." Dax frowned. "That sounds like a death wish." "It's better than just dying," Silara countered. Hayes considered her plan for only a second. Then he gave the order. "All pilots to their stations. Prepare for evasive maneuvers." The final stand. The human warship accelerated, weaving through an asteroid field as the Zithar ships appeared behind them. The enemy warships opened fire. The human vessel rocked violently as energy blasts struck the hull. The crew fought back, returning fire while executing Silara's desperate strategy. As the Zithar pursued, Silara guided them into position. Almost there, another explosion rocked the ship. The shields were failing. But then, now, the human ship twisted sharply, breaking through the blind spot behind the Zithar flagship. Fire everything. The warship unleashed hell. Torpedoes slammed into the Zithar's targeting systems, blinding their sensors. The human ship spun away at full speed, escaping into hyperspace. They had survived. Barely. The aftermath. Silara's choice. The crew cheered. Relief filled the bridge. But Silara stood frozen, staring at the star map ahead. She had just saved them. She, a former Zithar officer, had just helped the human warship escape her own people. Dax stood beside her, watching her carefully. "You gonna tell me what's on your mind?" She didn't know how to explain it. She had been raised to hate humans, to see them as weak, disposable. But now, she had seen them fight. She had seen their courage, their resilience. And for the first time, she didn't know who she was anymore. Hayes approached her. "We owe you our lives." Silara swallowed. "No, you don't. I made this choice myself." Hayes studied her. "So, what now?" Silara clenched her fists. She had a choice to make. Return to the Zithar, or fight for something greater. She thought of the colony she had tried to save, the innocents the Zithar had slaughtered. She turned to Hayes. "I'm done running." Dax smirked. "Good." Silara inhaled deeply. She had just chosen humanity. And there was no turning back. The plan to break the chains. Silara had never seen humans celebrate victory before. In Zithar culture, a battle won was just another step toward the next war. There were no celebrations, no relief, only preparation for the next conquest. But here, aboard this war-torn human vessel, she saw something she had never witnessed before. Hope. The crew of the warship was battered, exhausted, and carrying the scars of battle, yet they smiled. They laughed. Some sat together, telling stories of past battles. Others embraced, grateful just to be alive. Silara stood near the command center, watching. They didn't fight because they were ordered to. They fought because they refused to be broken. And now, so did she. The truth about the Zithar war machine. But their victory had come at a cost. The ship was damaged, low on supplies, and the Zithar would return in greater numbers. They had bought time, but not much. In the war room, Admiral Hayes, Dax Carter, and the senior officers gathered to plan their next move. Silara took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I know how to end this war." Silence. Every eye turned to her. Dax crossed his arms. "Pretty big claim, considering we barely survived back there." Silara's gaze was hard. "I spent years inside the Zithar war machine. I know their weaknesses, and I know how to stop them." She tapped a button on the display panel. The holographic image of a massive, fortified shipyard appeared. The Nexus core. Gasps echoed through the room. Hayes leaned forward, his expression serious. "That's the heart of the Zithar fleet." Silara nodded. "Every warship, every weapon, every piece of tech that fuels their conquest, it all comes from here. Without it, their expansion stops, their war machine collapses." Dax frowned. "And I'm guessing they guard it like it's the most important thing in the universe." Silara's lips pressed into a thin line. "Worse, it's impenetrable." A grim silence filled the room. But Silara wasn't done. "Unless," she said slowly, "we make them open the doors for us." The impossible plan. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Hayes studied the hologram. "You're talking about deception, the false entry." Silara nodded. "If we can trick them into thinking we're one of their own, we can get inside before they realize the truth." Dax scoffed. "You seriously think they won't recognize a human ship?" Silara smirked. "No, but they'll recognize a Zithar one." Hayes' eyes widened. "You want to steal a Zithar warship?" "Not just any warship," Silara corrected. She expanded the hologram, revealing a single Zithar command vessel stationed at a nearby outpost. She pointed at it. This ship belongs to High Warlord Threxus. If we take it, the Nexus Core will open its gates without question. Dax let out a low whistle. Stealing the ship from the guy who wants you dead. Yeah, that sounds fun. Hayes's fingers drummed against the table. It's insane. It's reckless. One mistake and we're all dead. He looked at Silara. But it just might work. The infiltration. The plan was set. The Zithar command ship was stationed at Outpost Theta, a heavily guarded supply hub. A direct assault would be suicide. So they wouldn't attack head-on. They would sneak in. Silara, Dax, and a small team of elite soldiers took a stolen Zithar transport, disguising themselves in Zithar armor and uniforms. It was risky. One wrong move, and they would be executed on the spot. Inside the transport, the tension was thick. Dax adjusted his stolen Zithar helmet. This is the worst plan I've ever been a part of. Silara smirked. Then you haven't been in enough battles. The ship docked at Outpost Theta. The team stepped onto the landing bay, blending in with the crowd of Zithar officers and guards. Silara walked ahead confidently, leading the group. She knew how the Zithar acted. No hesitation, no fear. That was the key to survival. A Zithar officer approached them. What's your clearance code? Silara's mind raced. Dax tensed beside her. If they were caught now, they wouldn't even get the chance to fight back. Then, Silara did something unexpected. She snarled in pure Zithar fashion. You dare question an officer of High Warlord Threxus? The Zithar guard flinched. Silara stepped forward, her glare like ice. You want to be the one explaining to Threxus why you delayed our mission. The guard swallowed hard. And no, Commander, I didn't. Then step aside, she growled. The guard immediately saluted and backed away. Dax whispered. That was both terrifying and amazing. Silara allowed herself a smirk. Let's move. They slipped through the outpost, undetected. The plan was working. The heist. They reached the command ship's docking bay. The towering warship loomed before them. Dax exhaled. Now comes the hard part. They hacked into the ship's systems, overriding security. Alarms blared as the vessel's AI detected the breach. Unauthorized access detected. Silara didn't hesitate. We have 2 minutes before the entire outpost is on top of us. Get this ship moving. Dax and the engineers worked fast, rerouting control to the human team. The ship roared to life. Guards flooded the hangar. The deception was over. Go, 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 Dax shouted, firing at the oncoming Zithar forces. The ship's engines blasted forward, ripping out of the docking bay as gunfire rained down. They had done it. They had stolen the flagship. Now, they were heading straight for the Nexus Core, and the Zithar had no idea what was coming. The battle for the future. The stolen Zithar command ship tore through hyperspace, its engines roaring like a beast in the void. Inside, the tension was thick. Every soldier, every officer knew what was at stake. Silara stood on the bridge, staring at the star map ahead. They were minutes away from their final destination, the Nexus Core, the heart of the Zithar war machine. Behind her, Admiral Hayes, Dax Carter, and the rest of the human strike force were running through final preparations. This mission had no backup, no second chances. Either they crippled the Nexus Core and shattered the Zithar's ability to wage war, or they died trying. The approach. Walking into the lion's den. The Nexus Core was a fortress. A massive space station floated in the darkness ahead, surrounded by Zithar warships, its defenses stretching for miles. Thousands of fighters patrolled the perimeter. Dax let out a low whistle. Yeah, this looks like a great place to die. Silara ignored the comment. Her mind was focused. The plan was insane, reckless, but it was their only shot. She turned to the pilot. Maintain course. Make sure we broadcast Threxus's command codes. The stolen warship's AI transmitted false clearance data, just as they had planned. For now, it worked. The Zithar forces did not fire. A voice crackled over the comms. Command ship, transmit mission directive. Silara leaned forward. Authorization Alpha Zeta. Priority cargo retrieval. A pause. The humans held their breath. Then, acknowledged. Proceed to Hangar Bay 12. They were inside. The infiltration. Ghosts among the enemy. As the ship docked inside the Nexus core, Silara and the human strike team moved quickly. Dressed in stolen Zithar armor, they blended into the station's massive halls, moving through the industrial corridors like ghosts. The plan was simple. Disable the station's shield generators. Destroy the primary fusion core. Escape before the entire place explodes. Simple, except they were deep inside enemy territory. Silara led the way, her every step precise. She knew this place. She had walked these halls before, back when she was still a loyal Zithar officer. Now, she walked among them as their greatest threat. Dax moved beside her. I hate this. Too quiet. Silara nodded. Something felt wrong. That's when the alarms blared. Alert. Intruders detected. Lockdown initiated. The deception was over. The ambush. Fighting in the depths. The hallways erupted in chaos. Zithar enforcers poured in from every direction, their plasma rifles cutting through the air. The human strike team took cover, returning fire with brutal efficiency. Silara moved like a predator, her stolen blade slicing through enemy soldiers with lethal precision. Dax threw a grenade down the corridor. We need to move. The blast sent bodies flying, giving them just enough time to push forward. They reached the shield control center, where a massive power core pulsed with energy. A single engineer could shut it down, but that wasn't going to happen. Zithar guards swarmed the room, their weapons primed. Silara stepped forward. You don't need to die for this war. Stand down. The lead Zithar soldier snarled. You are the traitor. You should be the one begging. There was no time for words. The room erupted into battle. Bullets, plasma bolts, and smoke filled the air. Silara tore through the guards, clearing a path to the control panel. Dax and Neorize hacked the shield system, inputting override codes. Come on, Nia muttered. Boom. The station's external shields dropped. Admiral Hayes's voice crackled through the comms. Shields are down. Fleet, move in. Outside, the human resistance fleet emerged from hyperspace, firing everything they had at the now vulnerable Nexus core. The final stand. High Warlord Threxus arrives. The battle in space rage. Human warships weaved through enemy fire, their cannons blasting through the Zithar defenses. Inside the station, Silara and the strike team raced toward the fusion core, their boots pounding against the steel floors. They had one last step, but as they reached the reactor chamber, the doors slammed shut. A deep, familiar voice echoed through the speakers. Did you really think I wouldn't be here? The air chilled. Silara turned slowly as High Warlord Threxus stepped forward, his armor gleaming black under the dim lights. His crimson eyes locked onto her. You disappoint me, Silara, he said. You had the potential to be great. Instead, you side with these vermin. Silara's grip tightened around her weapon. Threxus drew his blade. Your journey ends here. The duel. Silara versus Threxus. The battle outside vanished in Silara's mind. There was only her and Threxus. The warlord lunged, his massive blade slicing through the air. Silara dodged, barely, rolling to the side as sparks flew. Threxus was faster than she remembered. Stronger. He attacked again, his strikes relentless, brutal. Silara parried, but the force of his blows sent shockwaves through her arms. You were a fool to betray us, Threxus snarled. You could have ruled beside me. Silara blocked another attack, her breathing heavy. I saw the truth, she spat back. You don't rule. You enslave. Threxus roared in fury, his blade slamming into the floor as Silara dodged. She saw her opening. With a swift, lethal strike, she drove her blade through his side. Threxus staggered, his expression twisting in shock. "You?" he whispered. Silara yanked the blade free. "This war ends today." She grabbed a detonator, tossing it toward the reactor core. Boom! The entire station trembled. Dax shouted, "Time to go." Silara didn't hesitate. The strike team raced through the collapsing corridors, the explosion tearing the Nexus core apart. They leaped onto their stolen ship just as the entire station erupted in flames. The Nexus core was destroyed, and with it, the Zithar's war machine. The aftermath, humanity's first victory. From the bridge of the human warship, Silara watched as the Zithar fleet broke apart, leaderless, lost. Admiral Hayes exhaled. "We did it." Dax smirked. "Damn right we did." Silara closed her eyes for a moment. This was only the beginning. But for the first time, humanity had a fighting chance, and she would stand with them until the end. Defiance, victory, and a new beginning. The Nexus core was gone. The once mighty fortress of the Zithar Dominion, the heart of their war machine, had been reduced to fire and debris. The massive explosion had torn through its reactors, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. But the fight was far from over. Silara stood on the bridge of the stolen Zithar warship, her breathing steady, but her mind racing. She had done it. The very empire she had once served had been dealt a wound so deep that it might never recover. But now came the hardest part, surviving the aftermath. The battlefield in the void. From the viewport, she watched as the Zithar fleet crumbled. With their command structure in shambles, their warships hesitated, their formations breaking. Confusion spread among the ranks. For the first time in Zithar history, they were leaderless. "Look at them," Dax Carter muttered beside her. "They don't know what to do." Admiral Hayes' voice cut through the comms. "All human forces, press the attack. This is our chance." The human fleet surged forward, capitalizing on the enemy's disarray. The battle was no longer a desperate struggle to survive. It was a reckoning. Silara gripped the railing as the human ships weaved through enemy fire, striking down Zithar warships with brutal precision. But something was wrong. The Zithar weren't retreating. They were collapsing inward, forming a last stand near the wreckage of the Nexus core. Silara's eyes narrowed. "No, they're not breaking. They're regrouping." Hayes turned toward her. "What are you saying?" Silara recognized this strategy. She had seen it before. They're waiting for something. And then, a new signal appeared on the radar. A massive warship emerged from the shadows of deep space, a Zithar dreadnought. And not just any dreadnought. The Revenant. Dax's face paled. Oh, hell no. The last warship of High Warlord Threxus. Silara felt a chill run through her veins. The Revenant was Threxus' personal warship, a battleship 3 times the size of anything on this battlefield. A mobile fortress, built for one purpose: revenge. "Impossible," Dax muttered. "Threxus is dead." Silara's grip tightened. Even in death, his will lives on. The Revenant opened fire, obliterating a human battleship with a single blast. The shockwave sent debris flying in all directions. Admiral Hayes cursed. That ship alone could wipe out our entire fleet. Silara's mind raced. The Zithar were no longer fighting to win. They were fighting to take humanity down with them. She turned to Hayes. "We need to destroy that ship. Now." Dax raised an eyebrow. "Yeah? And how exactly do you suggest we do that?" "That thing makes our biggest ship look like a lifeboat." Silara inhaled deeply. "We take it from the inside." Silence. Hayes narrowed his eyes. "You're suggesting another infiltration." Silara nodded. "This time, we don't steal the ship. We end it." Dax let out a long breath. "I really hate your plans." Then you'll love this one even more, Silera said. Because this time, she wasn't coming back. The suicide mission. The plan was set. Silera, Dax, and a small strike team would take a stolen Zithar dropship, board the Revenant, and plant charges in its reactor core. The human fleet would hold the line, giving them time to reach the target. And then, they'd have 5 minutes to get out before the ship exploded. The chances of survival, nearly zero. But this was how the war would end. Boarding the Revenant, the stolen dropship weaved through the chaos, dodging enemy fire as it approached the Revenant's docking bay. Hold tight, Dax said, gripping the controls. This is going to be rough. The ship shook violently as enemy turrets ripped into their shields. They barely made it inside, crashing into the hangar with a jarring impact. Silera staggered out, drawing her weapon. Move. We don't have time. The team stormed through the corridors, cutting down Zithar soldiers in their path. The ship was a labyrinth of steel and darkness, but Silera knew exactly where they needed to go. The reactor core. The heart of the beast. They reached the core chamber, where the ship's massive reactor pulsed with raw energy. Nidorais rushed to the controls. I can overload the system, but once I start the countdown, there's no stopping it. Silera nodded. Do it. Nida's fingers flew across the panel. The reactor whined, its energy levels surging toward overload. Dax checked the timer. 5 minutes. We need tow. A blast knocked him off his feet. The doors slammed shut. Silera spun around, her heart stopping. A figure stood in the shadows. No, it couldn't be. Threxus. The final duel. Threxus lives. The High Warlord stepped forward, his armor scorched but his eyes burning with fury. Did you think it would be so easy? He growled. Dax coughed, struggling to stand. Oh, come on. We killed you already. Threxus smiled darkly. Then let's see if you can do it again. He lunged at Silera. Blades clashed in a storm of sparks. Threxus fought like a demon, his rage fueling every strike. But Silera was faster. She ducked under a deadly swing, twisting behind him. A single precise stab, right through his back. Threxus froze. You, he whispered, blood trickling from his mouth. Silera met his gaze. Your reign is over. She twisted the blade. Threxus collapsed. For the first time, the warlord of the Zithar was truly dead. The escape and the end of the war. The team raced back to the dropship, the countdown reaching its final seconds. They barely made it out as the Revenant exploded, the shockwave tearing through space. The Zithar fleet saw it happen. And then, for the first time in history, they ran. Humanity had won. A new beginning. Days later, Silera stood on Earth, gazing up at the sky. The war was over. The Zithar dominion had fallen. Dax walked up beside her. So what now? Silera didn't hesitate. She turned to him, a small smirk on her lips. Now, we rebuild. Together. She wasn't just a Zithar anymore. She was humanity's warrior. And she would fight for them until her last breath.